All right. Oh, good afternoon. This is Greg Hyer here with with Martin Brossman, wingman over there, and we are starting off with episode 47 of the Linking into Sales Social Selling podcast. Say hi, Martin.
Hey, what's happening?
All
Excited
right.
to be here in our tropical rainforest of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah, we had a lot of rain last night. So we want to welcome Eric and Rachel from Pipeliner CRM today. We're going to have this more discussion about social selling and particularly about the buyer's journey, using content to help salespeople kind of help their prospects and leads navigate through the buying process, as well as a few other topics related to social selling. So it should be fun, should be a good engaging conversation. But let's get started. So Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing, Greg. Thanks for having us on. My name is Eric Quanstrom. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Pipeliner CRM. We're a software company dedicated to making sales professionals' lives easier and helping their social selling journey, in and amongst other sales management, sales process, and ways that you can generate more revenue with our software.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. And Rachel, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Rachel Miller. I'm Chief Listener at Pipeliner CRM, and I guess I'm kind of just reassuring the world that we are practicing what we're preaching. So I'm out there every day educating folks on best practices for social selling, social listening, and really trying hard to be very transparent in how we generate leads through our content, and then mostly through our behavior of myself and our team.
All right, very cool. Very cool.
I love the title, Chief Listener. What a concept. Might help in marriages too, Rachel. What do you think?
Yeah. Actually, you can thank Eric for that. That was his great idea at my last company. So it's very apt, though, for what I do on a daily basis.
Yeah. Important piece. Excellent.
Very good. So why don't we get into we hear a lot about the new buyer's journey and how the internet has kind of evolved the buying process as sales is trying to catch up with this, and marketing's kind of been in the trenches figuring this out for the last few years. But what is your vision? What do you see as what the new buyer's journey looks like going forward? Whether it's been over the last couple of years, and then kind of where you see it going in the future.
Well, Greg, the interesting thing about the buyer's journey is really kind of taking a step back, or a step up, if you will, and thinking about just how the world has evolved over the last 5 couple of years. Some interesting talking points along those lines, just some things to consider, if you will. This was kind of top of mind for me, but if you really think about some of the top 10 things that have changed, especially in the software industry and in the B2B, business-to-business selling space, that are just radically different than they were even 10 years ago, right? So we've seen the rise of the cloud as probably the biggest change impacting our business in the sales landscape. And the fact that businesses have gone SaaS and their entire approach to infrastructure has changed, right? That forces a change of how we even view the world. We've moved from a world of on-premise, local installs, and downloading everything to having everything happen in your browser, much like this chat is happening on Hangouts right now inside of my web browser. I think a few other things that are worth putting out there are the rise of mobile. We're in an always-on world now. The rise of social. What do my friends, followers, connections, what do they have to say about anything and everything related to my business or my processes? What else has changed? The rise of purchase terms, right? So I think we've moved from a world where, honestly, as a marketer, we've seen a decline of brand loyalty. More people now than ever are becoming renters as opposed to buyers. We're seeing much more liquidity in the marketplace and less of a commitment mindset, right, where you bought it and you own it for years at a time. We've also seen the rise of support. So I'm just going to go quickly through a top 10 list that I have in my head. And what this has given rise to are many different channels of interaction. Everything from chat, email, phone, forums, or even, dare we hearken to the past, an actual in-person visit or meeting. Mm-hmm. The rise of BYOD, bring your own device. So, we can thank a lot of the large technology companies in the space, but frankly, it's the bottom-up approach of people bringing their own devices into the workplace that has radically shifted the buyer's journey for any B2B company. We've also seen somewhat of the decline of IT, where you rarely hear, hey, we're only a Microsoft shop anymore, or we're only a specific technology that we use, and that is what we rely on for everything. And so the rise of BYOD has also given rise to, kind of a best-of-breed approach, whereby I can get the most out of software by integrating solutions that meet my needs most aptly for the use case that I'm interested in. And then the last three are the rise of personalization, which has given us more substitutes than ever before, because people are choosing products that say something about themselves. They're emotional. They reflect who we are as people. They're aspirational. And this we definitely see in B2B, where there's actually more pressure on buying decisions than even in the B2C world. And then the last two, the rise of inbound, which is where we've really discovered, and from a marketing purview, I think we've seen this full force, that people prefer pull as opposed to push, right? And that's led to an inbound revolution. The term didn't even exist 9 years ago, and now it's on the tip of every marketer's tongue. And then last but not least, and kind of the thrust of what we're going to talk about here today, is the rise of content. So, when you think about even 5 years ago, most brands were not investing in creating their own content, right? We were reliant on mainstream media, advertising, ways of getting the word out that didn't involve us actually creating that word in the first place. So we now live in a world where it's a rare business that I meet that isn't thinking firstly and foremostly about the kind of content they want to create and how they want that content to reflect their brand. So that's a quick top 10 just to frame this conversation up and give us some thoughts that take us beyond just the mundane and the tactical, and give us a real insight into what the state of play is in the world today.
Well, I think that was an excellent rundown, and it's a lot of things for businesses going forward to consider. I can think of a company right now that does have that mentality of, hey, we're like a .NET shop, and adopting these newer technologies, like everyone uses PCs instead of Mac. It's and they think that they can build a better PC over a Mac, or maybe it's just personal preference or anything like that. But they also maybe they realize that if they put more Macs into business, they'd be out of a job too. So, but that is kind of interesting. The bring your own device approach. Yeah, I know there's a lot of conversation in the market. I guess a lot of salespeople are even using their own devices, to access content. I do. I do have a work laptop, but I can access a lot of the stuff from my personal laptop. So it seems like a duplication of resources that really isn't needed. But yeah, this is a great thing for us to go down. And let's Martin, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think it boils down to we can learn more about our customers than ever before. How do we handle this? Now we have so much data available to scrape and get and information. How do we handle it? And one of the things is I'm realizing, Eric, is marking the data that we might have but not have permission to know yet, and the data that we might have that we do have permission versus, LinkedIn data is generally, to me, more you've got permission to know that, then they forgot to set their personal settings on Facebook, and you don't necessarily have permission to bring it up. So that's just something that popped in my head when you were doing it, as well as a tangent, comment of is that something you should be marking in your database or in your CRM?
Well, I think more importantly, there's no excuse for a salesperson not to do their research. I know personally it's incredibly frustrating when you get on a call, like you've done your research, you're not ready to buy, but you're really excited about this product, and the salesperson gets you on the phone and you have to give them the lowdown of what your company does, what's your use case, when they could have spent 5 minutes on LinkedIn or check out my Facebook page, and we could have skipped that whole part of the conversation and got really down to what's important to me.
Yeah, Eric, go. Love to hear that.
Yeah, and I think that echoing what Rachel's saying, what we're really talking about, and the reason why I opened with that kind of context of what's changed is because salespeople the world over are affected by this change, right? So the sales process itself is radically different. And what is radically different is the way in which you conduct sales. I think that there's a large body of research, and I don't need to, kind of convince anyone that probably regularly listens to this podcast, but that sales is entering the picture at a much later stage on that buyer's journey, right? And I think this is true pretty much the world over. And where they're entering has to be at a higher level than it was in the past, right? And this is foundational when you really get right down to it, because building on all of this data, building on the multiplicative sources that can be consulted and the understanding that goes into any product or process for selling my product or service has to take these things into account. What Rachel was just saying is that as a consumer, as a customer, as a buyer, I will not respond favorably, and I think that the patience level is already decreasing. We've seen it. Anyone that's on the front line sees this every single day. They want to be treated as individuals. They want to have people who do their homework. They want to have a meaningful interaction and be given a synthesis of information that helps them make a better decision, right? None of this is rocket science, but this is a radically different way than I think a lot of people, salespeople, conceptualize or used to conceptualize their job function.
Yeah, that's a great point. You said that sales has to enter in at a much earlier stage than before. There's as you kind of look. Well, I guess if you hear some of the other folks out there, some of the other social selling evangelists, they'll say that sales almost has to become like a, they have to have marketing skills. I don't want to say mini marketer. That's but anyways, but when you look at the differences between the sales and a marketing organization, marketing usually has to work at a very high 30,000 foot level because they're working with large groups of people, and then sales is traditionally been in the trenches working face to face with folks. But it sounds like what you're saying is that maybe they need to come back out of the trenches before they actually get into the trenches. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually have a word for exactly what we believe the sales model of the future, or the salesperson of the future, is, and we call them salespreneurs, right? And so salespreneurs in the pipeline or CRM parlance essentially means that these are people that are creating net new business, right? So ultimately what we're talking about is sales as a skill set or a bundle of skill sets are actually broadening. Right? No entrepreneur would focus only in one area and build out PhD level expertise in very narrow skill sets. What we're talking about are knowledge workers that are, for lack of a better way of putting it, advanced generalists, right? They're part psychologists, they're part advocates, they're part support, they're part marketing, as you alluded to, part research assistants, and then part, and this is probably the largest part, that you really have to drive credibility on, you have to be part subject matter expert, right? So you do have to actually go deeper in your product or business's areas of impact, right? For me or our sales team, that would be CRM software, and the sales process and methodologies associated therein. All those areas of promise, salespeople have to get really focused and become subject matter experts in their respective fields.
Excellent. I guess, and where do they get started with that?
Well, I think that ultimately a lot of it's incumbent upon the company themselves to provide training, right? Firstly and foremostly, I think a lot of companies want to give product training and then leave it at that point. Leave it at that full stop or that service stop. I think that, the part where I'd love to see a lot of companies go a lot further is in awakening the curiosity within, in and around the areas of promise of your business, right? Because you never know Well, actually, you do know, and it can be very directed and very specific. But ultimately, what I'm talking about is having a lot of different tools in the tool belt for the various stages of the buy cycle as you move through them.
Okay. All right. And I guess how about an example of a tool to consider? Maybe this might be a good point here to talk about content in particular.
That's exactly right, and that goes directly to the heart of kind of our philosophy at Pipeliner, which is that we lead with content. We lead with a notion that we want to educate, right? Because we believe that by educating, we are going to help customers of ours as well as folks who have yet to hear of our brand, but they're receiving value from us. They're getting to a better place. They're learning best practices. They're changing or shifting their thinking. We're giving them context around things that they could do better, or things that, frankly, they've wasted their time with, right? Content is all about awakening that kind of value that I believe that most professionals are searching for on a day in and day out basis, especially the best producers, the best top cream of the crop folks are. You know, when you used to hear Jack Welch talk about A players at GE, he was talking about the kind of people that never just let well enough be. He was talking about the kind of people that would always question and be intellectually curious and try to get the most out of whatever it is they were doing, right? Just think for yourself of the best employees that you've ever worked with, or the best sales folks you've ever encountered. These were people that were not like robotic in their in their approach. They were very, dare I say, Renaissance people. You know, they communicate well. They had a wealth of knowledge. They enriched your time spent together, right? These are all the hallmarks of really effective sales, understanding of the sales process. And I think that understanding or having a wide breadth of content is where you can really succeed. That's my belief.
Okay. All right. Very good. Martin, you got anything?
No, I'm just really enjoying the what you're talking about is the sales cycle and the piece of training. If we're just training in content, and the salespeople are only getting in training and content, the importance of them potentially getting training on their own, they can sometimes get from companies like yourself and others, and the importance of them really learning of, I've got the number of tools available to a sales professional now are overwhelming to get information. I've got to learn a few and get competent with them, stick with them long enough, and do it. So I think, my advice to salespeople is if you're not getting at the job, you better be getting it on your own if you want to stay current. And I welcome either of your views on that, because I think we're in a lifelong learning, if they pay for it or not type of thing.
Well, that's exactly right, Martin, and that's exactly kind of, if you think deeply about the word entrepreneur, right? That's what entrepreneurs do. They don't necessarily need to be told, here's how to improve yourself, here's how to improve your business, here's how to grow from what is essentially nothing. That is the definition of entrepreneurialism. It's creating something from nothing, right? And you could view every sale that it's ever made as just that. I'm now creating value, a win-win for myself and my potential customer by providing them with a tool, a solution, a product, or a service that will help them do their jobs better.
All right, Rachel, what you got?
I was just going to completely agree with Martin. I think salespeople really need to take ownership of their own education. I mean, you do expect your company to give you the product training, but a lot of the stuff that we're talking about relates back to what Eric mentioned with, you bring your own device, you bring your own personalization. There's so many duplicate tools out there, especially talking about content, and that's fantastic, but you need to be educated in your choice of tools. I think your company can recommend what they feel is best, but you're more than capable of doing your own research and keeping up to date. Whether it's on your corporate blog or pursuing information from your competitors, I think it's the whole salespreneur spirit is, staying at the top of your game, because it's not just for your company's success, it's for your own personal success.
Great points. Why don't we, since Rachel, since you're the chief listening officer, obviously you need to listen very closely to what's going on with what your customers are what your prospects are looking for in particular. So how do you think that sales should be using their listening skills, the social listening skills, and other tools out there to help navigate this buying process?
Well, because salespeople do come in at the very late stage of the buying cycle. I mean, I truly believe, the person's probably made up their mind, and the salesperson really just has to come in and validate their choices, whether it's by supplying them with content that is like a case study to validate that, yeah, we're the best choice for you because look at this guy, he's using it and he's very successful. And using tools to pick up buying signals, you're stepping in at the right point. So if someone's out there like, okay, I'm comparing, we'll stick with CRM. I'm comparing A and B, Pipeliner versus Microsoft Dynamics. That's when you step into the conversation, and not to say, I'm the best, but to highlight through content and through your words that you're an expert. You're what's the word I'm looking for? You're a thought leader in the field, and you can help them through the buying cycle, not push them, but help them make the best choice.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's often that you get into a situation in the sales cycle where your prospect is shortlisting, right? And being able to talk effectively amongst alternatives and why each alternative might make sense or might not make sense, and really take it to not just the level of features and benefits, but why you would want those features and benefits in your particular business is really a value-add conversation to get into. And the only way you get into that is by listening, right? It ultimately stems from effective qualification through that part of the sales process, but then really taking that conversation and going, I like to think of metaphorically, going much higher level. Because ultimately a buyer, when you get beyond kind of what they say that they want, what they really want are very emotional needs. Right? They want the peace of mind of knowing that, that their sales team is going to be productively working each and every day. Right? How do you translate that into a feature? In the case of like CRM.
Right.
Well, you elevate the conversation. You elevate the conversation around, what does your sales process look like? What are your stages? How do I get into this stage effectively and move a prospect, so to speak, to the next stage? And ultimately what you're doing is you're figuring out the natural steps that people would take on their journey that you already have given deep probing thought to, and are looking to share that knowledge kind of in a best practice or in a content-driven way with that prospect, so that they feel like, oh, this time that we spent, it's totally useful. This guy gave me the perspective that I needed for why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it seemed like a natural choice. Isn't it funny that any time that we buy something and we feel really good about the purchase thereafter, we always feel good because it made us feel smart, or made us feel like intelligent, or like we were a better version of ourselves for having made that purchase. We made the right choice, right? Isn't that so much of what sales is?
Significantly agree with you, yes.
Yeah, and so really, it's like Stephen Covey once said, start with the end in mind, right? Yeah. So how do I work my way backwards then from that place of customer satisfaction? I feel really great about my choice. I know all the people on my team are going to endorse this choice. In a B2B decision where there could be, many stakeholders involved, where there could be many opposing viewpoints, where there could be limited budget and scarce resources and definitely limited time to evaluate, right? But ultimately, we want a great outcome. So if I, as a salesperson, can put myself into the channels, into a listening mode, really understand where that journey is likely to take place, and then begin to offer appropriate value at each stage or each step of the way, the sale becomes a natural byproduct of all of that kind of like little detail work, does it not?
Yeah. Greg, if you don't have something, I want to jump in a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to back up a second and talk about this wonderful piece of the buyer's journey, and how each person in the buying process is going to have their own unique convincer strategy that I need to move to the next level. And this is also, to me, where Rachel comes in listening for these things that you may need. I mean, as simple as to go to the next level, Eric, you may need to see and touch it. Rachel may need to hear what other people have to say about it, and so forth. So that just popped up as you were talking, and love to hear from either of you of how do you train yourself to hear what is the convincer strategy on each piece of the buying cycle, of what they need to hear. Okay, now I'm ready to get on more information. Now how much information I'm ready. Now I need to check with references on it. It's really interesting to listen to it. So just any comments on that are welcome.
Well, I know for me, I think a lot of it just comes from experience. We're a Hootsuite shop, and if I catch someone commenting whether they're looking for a recommendation or they're just starting out, I'm looking for a new CRM, I'll look at their LinkedIn, I'll look at their bio, and I'll then assign that tweet to whoever I think will be able to best engage with them. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's one of our senior sales staff, sometimes it's Eric. Because you want, people like pure recommendations. So if I reach out and if someone's in marketing, they're in a similar role, they're going to respect what I have to say. And again, I think it just comes from experience. So you might turn a couple people off by shooting them over to a third-party review site, but I think eventually you'll get the hang of it.
Eric?
Yeah, one of the things that I think about a lot is marketers traditionally, and I'm speaking mainly from a personal point of view, a very subjective point of view, having led marketing departments at a number of different companies, I'm often the buyer. You know what I mean? Whether it's buying advertising or buying tools or buying resources, you name it. There's rarely a marketer that isn't on the buy side of the equation, and so there's a lot of insight to be gained from just studying your own habits, studying your own tendencies, studying your own personal preferences. And so when I see research that talks about how the average B2B buyer consults 6 different sources before they even engage with a salesperson, what that means, and that research is coming from Google, by the way, what that means is that they're going to third-party review sites, that they're going to Google and typing in product X, Y, or Z, or I have this problem. Maybe they're looking on Quora and even asking the question directly, or they're going to LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, some other social network, and they're socially grabbing answers from the crowd or from their friends and colleagues. Ultimately, we become much more resourceful in the time period that it takes to do any of this, air quotes, research has diminished to such an extent that we now, again, as part of that journey and as part of some of those trend lines, we bounce all over the place. Mm-hmm. in a way of kind of assimilating information as a buyer in order to facilitate this greater goal of I want to make the right decision. I want to make a decision that meets my needs. Even if we can't articulate it that well, that's where we're headed when we ask Google a question or we do any of these behaviors around the buy cycle. And so we had mentioned at the outset the concept of triggers, and I think that's what Rachel was alluding to. When listening on social, social's great because it's all digital media, and you can actually pay attention to the triggers in a very horizontal way, right? Like we could listen to anyone, anywhere on Twitter talking about any given subject, right? You can also do it in a very deep way in the sense that, Greg, if I want to sell to you, and I'm tapped into you, I might start profiling you, or to use Martin's example earlier, if Martin's the subject, I can basically start to look for triggers in your own streams, in your own behavior. I can walk in your social footprint and be able to potentially pay attention to even indirect cues, right, of when to interact, of when to step in, of when to, apply some sort of technique, so to speak, from a social selling perspective.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing. And then pass over to Greg. What the human tendency is to assume my model of reality is the same as yours, and that's the one thing I see. And the challenge is, if you don't have enough life experiences that force you to go, whoa, the world's different for other people. This is a longer learning curve to get there. But I'll hand it over to you, Greg.
All right. Yeah, I mean, great insight. Why don't we go ahead and move on to talking about just getting a little in depth on triggers and listening for them. I think that there are a number of different tools out there that can help with identifying things. Obviously, people can go through their social stream manually and try and look for stuff, search on hashtags on Twitter or even Facebook and Google Plus now. But what is a salesperson exactly? What are they looking for, and then what do they do with the information when they get it? I mean, go ahead and take it, either one of you.
Well, it's funny. Rachel and I just got done compiling a list, and I'll let you take it away. But we started down a list of what we call modern social tools. We led with Pipeliner because we know all of our sales team will be using our own software for all of their profiling and social feeds information. But then beyond that, what tools do we want to layer in for them to be successful, especially at ascertaining triggers?
All right. Go ahead,
Rachel. That wasn't the lead-in I was expecting. Well, I think a lot of it's common sense with monitoring triggers, and our sales team, which I feel like is, like many others out there, a whole range of skill sets and expertise levels. We have people who are very adept at social selling, others who are at the very early stages. So we're taking a very cautious approach, giving them best-of-breed tools that we've hand-selected and are training. And for the specifics of what we determine to be a buying signal are, obviously they're talking about CRM or pipeline management, or a lot of it's just productivity. They're just looking to streamline. So you can get really granular or quite broad, depending on what platform you're listening on. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, and I think so. So when they find them, obviously they're when they find these triggers, they find these folks that are talking, on social or maybe they're on the website and you're tracking with a pixel or something along those lines. Are you getting that information to sales? Obviously is pretty critical. So are you basically, I guess, are you using the CRM in order to kind of filter through that, and then the other tools to kind of, I guess maybe I'm just trying to understand the process a little bit more of what you guys do.
Yeah, so we are, as I mentioned earlier, kind of in the Bob, best of breed, eating our own dog food, whatever cliche it is you want to use. We're big believers, and frankly, this list that we have is fairly long and very point specific at what we want. So it includes things like a marketing automation tool. We use HubSpot, to name names. It includes things like, since we're on linking into sales, we have LinkedIn Sales Navigator accounts for members of our sales team. And we build tactical processes, if you will, around those tools. So those are kind of like broad brush. But a good example would be, taking, I don't know, let's take one of the more simple trigger events that you're ever going to encounter. LinkedIn will automatically tell you when somebody is new into a job in your network. So one of the processes around that might be, okay, I've done business with this person in the past. I might congratulate them on a new job and set a reminder or a tickler in my CRM for follow-up once they've got their sea legs under them and once they're deciding around what tools they've either inherited or what tools that they're currently using. So maybe I'm going to follow up with them in 30 to 60 days. Maybe I'm also going to set a few kind of like pins or reminders, and again, this is all kind of garden variety stuff for CRMs, but around when my follow-up is going to take place or when I'm going to check back with them from a social feeds and profiling perspective to just see where they're at, right? So interested is interesting, and by paying attention, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It's not like I have to go and see what's Craig up to every single day for the next 30 days. But I can actually set profiles and alerts to get that information fed to me in very effective ways that will make me stay on top of you in an authentic and meaningful manner, such that when I decide to re-engage that relationship, you're going to be like, oh, hey, thanks, Eric. I did change jobs. It's going great. I'm drinking from a fire hose. I'm glad that we did business in the past. Here's kind of some of the things that I'm looking at. And then, boom, I can all of a sudden take that conversation and start down a content cycle, start down a nurture cycle, begin to inform and educate in ways that will be welcomed by you. Presumably, we had a good relationship when we did good business in the past. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you're going to be all the more receptive. You're in a new job. You've got to succeed. Your antenna are up for good best practices. And hey, thanks, Eric, for being on my team. Thanks for helping me out. Thanks for understanding my situation. And all of this spawned from like one trigger event.
Excellent. That's a good insight there. I don't know if most salespeople actually have yet to discover the value of actually monitoring what's going on within their own professional networks, or with the company providing them the tools to do such a thing, because it is incredible when if you go and transition from one position to another, and then the salesperson reaches out to you just wanted to continue the conversation to make sure that things are going well. That whole kind of it's a maneuvering tactic, I guess, in one way or the other. Kind of the opposite of land and expand.
But let me explain and be very clear here, because I don't want to set a false impression. I think that the whole mindset is one of giving, right? Like, this is stemming off of anyone that's familiar with the Go-Giver kind of methodology. Anyone that really is just a human being will understand when I'm coming to you and I have something that I expect in return, or when I actually say, you know what, I do give a rip about the people that I do business with, and I just want to enrich their lives because I am in that position to do so, right? And it's a massive mind shift, although it's very subtle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. I agree. It responds to the fact that people are human. That is a key differentiator among some salespeople too. So, Martin, you want to add anything to that?
No, I just enjoy the conversation. I think this is demanding more of salespeople that really have in history. You have to have a maturity for seeing through other people's eyes in a way that I'm grateful that sales is demanding more of that from us, because I think it makes us better people, frankly. So that's just something I'm noticing on the side as we're looking at this. Is it always is better when you really realize that the world in your head is very different from the world in other people's head.
Yeah, I can understand that. But we've said a couple times, I think during this show that having experience and and all that stuff. I guess if there are any young folks that are actually listening to the show, that they may feel like that if you could be too young to do sales, and I don't think that's really the case, because you can get the experience of compassion, during compassion, generosity, from just about anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the sales. In the sales position, is just whether or not can you carry that over into what you do every day, and turn it into business. And it's incredible, what can happen when you just have the right attitude going into it and using the right tools for it. So, the
other thing that I would say just about that small use case, the other thing that just really pops into my mind and again, this is such a marketing-dominated thought. I'm sure Rachel will smile when she hears it. It really comes down to, you used the words land and expand earlier, and although that's a trite, pithy thing that has a lot of people have talked about, I really believe, in my experience, in my career, the cheapest, most effective, highest conversion rate, whatever other adjective you want to put in direct opposition to land and expand, if I cultivate and grow a network, the most happy people to buy from me again are my current customers. You know what I mean? Like, if I truly am doing my job right and I am working towards the greater common good, which again, believe in what you're selling, believe in what you're doing, then I'm going to have a lot of happy customers that are not only going to expand me within their own organizations, potentially buy more products, services, more seats, but they'll also expose me to their networks. And I'll become a trusted agent to them. I'll become that referral that, they're happy to give, and they didn't think twice about giving it because I did my part well, And then ultimately, what a lot of the social tools that are out there do exceptionally well in 2014, and I expect this to only increase, is they start to tell us stuff about our network that we didn't already know, right? Or that we weren't focused on or paying attention to. And so as you grow your network of success, and you again, change jobs, or you move companies, or they move companies, or ultimately the cycle of life continues, a lot of that business kind of comes back to the network. And frankly, this is a concept as old as time, right? Like, this is what we used to call the golden Rolodex back in the day, or my spreadsheet of best customers, or my way of understanding who my guys or my peeps, my tribe are. And ultimately that is kind of what, again, I think salespeople need to be focused on a day in, day out basis, because if you do, then everything else behind that aligns so nicely. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, actually, very, very well. So why don't we go ahead and let's go and actually bring a conclusion to this episode here. But what I want to do before we go is give you just a few minutes, both of you, to kind of, I guess, talk about what you're doing at Pipeliner, and understanding that there are other CRM choices out there, and I guess, talk about what makes you different from the other solutions that are out there, and what is it that your customers actually really love about you guys?
Well, I'll start the ball rolling here and just say that what we're trying to do at Pipeliner is, attract people that have a value to the visual, and being able to see. So Pipeliner looks different than most other CRMs that people will ever encounter, in the sense that the main kind of screen is entirely visual. All of your sales stages and all of your deals are on one pane of glass, so to speak. And so all of your activities and organization are all in a sense, captured in our sales pipeline view, right? So that I can then begin to be very productive with my use of time. We like to say that the person that's using Pipeliner to the best of its abilities is more effective than their counterparts, right? Because they can govern their own activities, and they can work towards these outcomes that we've been talking about through the entire podcast more efficiently than they would have using any other tool, right? And then we've built around kind of that core tools that we feel enhance the natural sales process and the natural sales management processes of a company to get maximum results. So we haven't wasted time with certain features, and we don't focus on things like customer support, firstly and foremostly. We're not a marketing automation system. We're not trying to be all things to all people. In fact, what we are is very squarely focused on the sales function within an organization, right? So most of what occurs outside of that is kind of like coloring outside the lines. And I think it's fair to be very, very clear about that, so that we can draw a distinction between what we do versus what dozens of our other competitors are trying to do.
Okay, very good. And Rachel?
I mean, I think what Eric said really encapsulates what Pipeliner does best, and maybe just to echo that is, it's an exciting time to be a salesperson, and it's a really exciting time to be in CRM, and there's just a wealth of data, and I think what Pipeliner does really well is it highlights what's important to you and when you need it the most in a very visual format. I'm a visual learner, and I think a lot of people are, so it really cuts out the noise and makes what you need to reach out to a contact or get a quick synopsis of it, what's in your pipeline, dead easy. And that salespeople they're busy people. So when you can make it as easy as possible and increase their productivity, that's a win for everybody.
All right. And so where can folks learn a little bit more about Pipeliner?
PipelinerCRM.com.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah, you can follow us at Pipeliner CRM. You can find us on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Really, anywhere that you type in Pipeliner, we should be there. If we've done our job as marketers.
Yeah, if we're not, please let us know.
That's right. That's right.
Very good. All right. So. Also, another thing too is that I actually I think I've prior to Social Selling Hour, I'm fairly sure I heard of Pipeliner before, but really got introduced to you guys with Social Selling Hour on Twitter, the Twitter chat, which is at 4 p.m. Eastern on Mondays. Unfortunately, I missed the last one, and I'm ashamed that I did. But if anyone wants to get familiar with who the folks are, Rachel, and the last interview we had Brian Fanzo. They moderate the podcast, or I'm sorry, the Twitter chat. So by all means, come out and have a discussion and just see what kind of stuff they're doing out there to engage salespeople, get them into the new change in dynamic and that's going on among sales. So Martin, you want to wrap up with anything?
No, just it was great meeting you all, and excited to continue the conversation. Of the nuances of sales is just an infinite resource to learn about, and I just like the idea of usually when we get to know a little bit more about our customer, we build more lasting relationships that help with everything. So the good stuff, and you guys are doing great work there. Great to meet you.
Right back at you. And Greg, for the viewers or the listeners, I should say, it's hashtag SS Hour.
Yep. SSR.
Yep. SSHOUR.
I like the hand signs there.
Yeah.
Feels like a Timberlake and Fallon again.
But
we'll
great fun.
And we'll definitely put a link in the show notes to that Twitter search. So if people go out to linkedintosales.com, look up episode 47, and you'll be able to get directly to that chat. Put it on your calendar as well. Make it a reoccurring event for every Friday or Monday at 4 o'clock, 1 p.m. Pacific, and come out and join that and have that discussion. So this wraps up the Linking into Sales podcast, episode 47. Thank you very much, Rachel and Eric, for joining us today. And
our pleasure.
We really hope to, maybe we'll have you guys back on again in a few months and see how things are going. Martin, thank you very much, of course.
Yeah, it's always fun. Look forward to have you on. We'll have another show coming soon.
Yes, very much. All right. So you've been watching Linking into Sales using social media to support the sales cycle.